Today's guest is one of Cairns' most prominent developers, being in the Cairns industry for almost 20 years. It is my pleasure to introduce one of the managing directors of MiHaven, Sarah Mort. Thanks for joining us today, Sarah.
Thanks for having me here, Sean.
You just walked into the room and pretty quickly we started to go down a rabbit hole before the cameras even started recording, and I was like, hold up. We need to take a step back here and let's have these amazing conversations on camera. So I'm thrilled for you to be here today and to partake in this conversation. For those that may not know of who you are or MiHaven, can you give us a quick little summary of some of the projects you guys have done?
Sure. Okay. So James and I are Melburnians. Found our way up here about 20 years ago.
We won't hold that against you.
That's okay. I spent half my career in Sydney, so I went up there in my 20s. My background was town planning, worked for some big engineering companies. James, I met in Mission Beach randomly on a property deal, so that's another story for another day. So it's a long story, but we did spend about 7 years of our life in Mission Beach and survived 2 cyclones. And I can tell you there was a turning point almost to head back down south and continue my old career. But we survived it, came up to Cairns and created MiHaven. MiHaven really was created on the back of the cyclone. And we had a number of government projects to rebuild into the local community.
And I have to ask, what brought you to Cairns? What was...
So Cairns specifically...
Or was it like me? I originally was moving up here for 3 months, almost 2 decades ago.
It wasn't a backpacker story because I was definitely in my late 30s at the time, but it was love, really, and just a challenge of doing something completely different. I think I was pretty burnt out in Sydney. I'd been with Multiplex and had done some pretty major projects, and I felt from my career perspective, I didn't need any more challenges of running another $300 million sort of project like Woolloomooloo, but there was definitely more soul and purpose of being in a regional community, and I think that's what's changed my life. So having a background in planning and people management with planning and urban, sort of creating urban design, I still saw Cairns as such a young city in many perspectives with so much more opportunities. Sure, heaps of challenges with the region, with flooding and cyclones and all the other things that we go through year on year, but it also makes the most resilient community to live in. So COVID really changed that for us.
Yes.
We were always on the cusp of, we'd been here by 15 years at that point, and we do have family, and James's family, kids are in Melbourne, was like, when do we come home? But I think I woke up one day and thought, I think I am home.
And it's interesting, like myself, I moved up here. I was only ever coming up here, I think, for 3 to 6 months. Fell in love with the city, and here I am all those years later. I think it talks to that sort of almost the spell Cairns casts on people, the fact that so many people have a similar story. They come up here not really picturing themselves staying up here long term. Mm-hmm. Fast forward 20 years and they're still here and they're still enjoying the city. For you, where do you see the city going?
I think it's got a lot of challenges at the moment. So I did come bouncing in the room, bursting with a bit of intel. Which
I loved. I was so excited. I saw that. I'm like, so okay, we need to get to this quickly.
What are you going to jam me on and I don't know the data? So I did, and I'm going to plug Pete Faulkner for helping me with thinking about this. So I wasn't aware because I'm a little bit busy at the moment, which we'll talk about later. So I'm not keeping abreast with just where the council's going with the planning scheme, but I understand that the regional planning scheme draft came out yesterday. And so I asked Pete about that, what are we predicting on population growth? Because population growth or decline drives the future of any place and the pressure points that we have to deal with. The quick summation of that at the moment, and this is probably where politically as a community we're probably going to have to really raise our voices, is they're predicting Cairns basically for the last 10 years has been growing at 1.5%. And that's pretty strong. There was a little bit of a dip during COVID, but it dipped all over Australia.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I think politically they've probably misforecast that, and the planning scheme at the moment is erring between 1 to 1.5% growth, but it feels like it's been weighted down on the lower number of 1%. If they get that wrong, it's a miss of about 50,000 people.
And that's for across Queensland? So
no, that's just talking Cairns.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so they're predicting in the regional plan that for the next chapter of that planning scheme, that we will grow between a 1 to 1.5%.
Yep.
But if they err on the conservative of 1%, they could be undercooking it by about 50,000 people.
And is that over a 25-year?
I think so,
Yep.
yeah. And that's basically 3 innerspells of getting it wrong, potentially.
And to give some meaning to that sort of 1.5%, so Cairns at the moment has a population, I believe, about 180,000,
Something like
depending
that.
on
where you measure it.
where you measure it. But just for quick maths, say the population's 200,000, 1.5% would equal 3,000 people per year moving to the region as net growth.
Sure.
Where if you're at 1%, it's 2,000 people. Over a 10-year period, the difference between 1% and 1.5%, to your point, is 10,000 people over a 10-year period.
Yeah.
So that creates a massive challenge there. And I guess, to just sort of quickly think on it, you're talking the population, I guess, of Edge Hill, Whitfield, and maybe even Moorabool would be around 10,000 people. Mm-hmm. So over a 10-year period, if they miss by that much, that creates a lot of challenges. And
yeah, the big challenge really is it's your infrastructure. Right down to your hospitals, and to your water, and the crisis we've been in the last few years with our water. Couldn't believe that we live in the wettest part of Australia and we could run out of water, but go figure. So it's your water, it's your power loads, it's every bit of infrastructure. And as we know, our council has always argued that Cairns has missed out significantly in that distribution. And if they continue to put the lens onto the southeast corner in Brisbane, and I don't feel like sitting here, I'm not a politician, but I think that's where we need to scream from the top as to making sure that the radar and the lens is focused back on Cairns for its future. And
the challenge is, if we talk water, we talk power, we talk sewerage, that's not something that you can come in and fix overnight.
No, and what we all know is when you see the hospital expanding, it's usually 20 years behind what the growth was. So the pressure point never fixes. We can never fix it. We're always lagging behind. So the other issue in Cairns is we've run out of land. We have literally run out of land. You go and try and find a subdivision at the moment, and the cost of that to develop and to sell it is now double to what we saw before COVID. And we've got some physical challenges. We're very much like Sydney. You've got mountains down one side, you've got the water, the ocean on the other, and you're a lineal city. Townsville's got a lot more opportunity for expansion, and that's why it's a geographically urban sort of city, completely different. It's all like satellite suburbs. Cairns has got that very traditional grid system of the CBD, which I love. And then your inner city clusters, and then the spread going down. And we know the future is going to be the Southern Corridor. But at the moment, to raise, if it's 200 million, it's going to be 400 million in the next 5 years. The cost is only going to escalate. That compounds back into the community, and it comes back to the land price and the affordability of this town.
There's a couple of things there. I guess there's the problem with that in the fact that we're restricted with housing. The opportunities to do more greenfield development is so limited. But with that also becomes an opportunity. If people are looking at investing in the city and investing in different projects, both commercial, residential, into different businesses in Cairns, where there's problems, there's opportunity. So for me, I see that as a massive green light on a whole lot of things, to have that confidence, to see those future predictions that the government are forecasting, knowing the fact that possibly could be on the conservative side. Suddenly that starts to create a lot of excitement for me, I guess. Yeah,
and I think Cairns Council is doing some really innovative stuff with, I don't know if you've been part of those workshops about trying to fringe the urban fringe and to green it and to try and make it cooler and trying to get that urban density happening, which I think James and I were obviously pioneers in that thinking many years ago. Like, I pushed that planning scheme and could prove that you could build a really high quality house on 200 square metres, but we've never been able to get it to scale at this point because of lots of other reasons.
And do you think the challenge is going to come from a local council front, or do you think it's going to come from a state government front? Where do you see the friction point, I guess?
I think it comes down to the community first. So the community has to come on board and say, we can deal with density. And we know that the face of the city has changed and it's going to continue to change. So politically, you've got to bring the community along on that journey of acceptance as to what do they think is tolerant for the future, with all the other issues of climate change and sustainability and livability. I personally love the density of this city, but I know it definitely has to go into a higher load of density to deal with the population growth.
And I think it's a matter of doing it right as well. You can whack a whole lot of units up and do it wrong, or you can do it in a really tasteful, meaningful way that suits the character of the city.
And that's where I saw Cairns has this unique opportunity to try and direct the growth in the right way. Whereas, growing up in Melbourne and Sydney, and I did a thesis on the rise of residential high-rise in the CBD of Sydney, and it's like 30 years ago. And it was just really interesting as to what was sparking that. And it was just a little change in the planning scheme that favoured floor space to height that then made it catalytically possible for developers to convert from doing commercial to residential into the CBD. They had heaps of friction at a planning level, and I worked at Sydney Council at the time because suddenly we had residents living in the CBD complaining about nightclubs and all the things that the city should do. And as planners, we'd be at the front counter going, what have we created here? We've created a monster in the city. But, they're the things you have to think about.
It's a bit like you'll have a rubbish dump, and the rubbish dump will be built well out of the city, and then you see the urban sprawl come out and engulf around the rubbish dump, and then people start complaining about the smell. And that's what I'm hearing happened in Sydney. The live music scene very much got shut down for a long time.
Shut down because people were like, well, I've just spent $2 million in this apartment. I don't want to hear that noise down the street.
And I think it's almost that adage as old as time, that NIMBY, that not in my backyard.
Yeah, always.
And that's a challenge moving into the future. And I think what you're saying, community first, is 100% right. You need the backing of the community to back the council to make these decisions that are the right decisions for the growth of Cairns.
Yeah.
So I think, chatting population growth, one of the big challenges is actually getting the forecasting right. You are crystal ball gazing, you have events come along like COVID, and then you have the reverse of that, and I guess the after effects of COVID was that a lot of people were leaving the southern states and moving to Cairns.
Yeah.
What's your concern about, forecasting that data and where that might land, I guess?
I'm not an expert in this space. It's certainly something as a planner you learn about, but you do know that if you get that projection wrong, and lots of other things can drive it. So if you're a mining area, it will go up and down because of, Darwin's the classic as to
very much
major infrastructure projects come in, make that city go completely nuts for about 5 or 10 years. Property, it's just like Western Australia. But then when that project finishes, it dives. You don't want that. So the thing about Cairns, where I see its resilience economically, is it's now been identified as the most diversified regional economy. And that's a really significant thing.
That's a really interesting point. I was actually at an investment night that you hosted the other night, and it really showcased to me the diversity of Cairns. A lot of people do still have that stigma that Cairns is a tourism town. Where has it diversified? What are the big sectors driving it at the moment?
I think there's so many subsectors that aren't on most people's radars. But for a long time, when we first arrived, it was like Townsville's got the control of the government, and we'll just be tourism, and therefore we're the greatest risk of economically being smashed in a downturn if the currency goes the wrong way or there's an airline strike. But we saw Townsville tip when Palmer shut down the mine, and that had a catastrophic effect. And then we just kept motoring through. So I don't know the granular detail to all of that, but I do know, obviously, medical health services is now the number one employer. And that's a lot to do with your ageing population. It would be driven by the NDIS. Also that Cairns Hospital is a major hub for the whole region, servicing the Cape and everything else that goes with it. Then there's just a lot of diversification in sub-tier markets. And we've discovered a lot of that research through the work we've been doing out at the airport. So, the airport itself is its own significant
100%.
economic hub, of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So aircraft engineering is servicing aircraft from PNG, the South Pacific, Asia. You've got one of the world's biggest aircraft engineering companies, Jet Aviation. It's been in Cairns for 20 plus years. but most of you wouldn't, have never physically gone in there and see what they do. Skytech, services helicopters from all over Australia and PNG.
Even the airport forecasts caught me by surprise. So talking basically doubling the passenger numbers through the airport over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yes, significant, right? And where are they all coming from? They're not all tourists, I can tell you that. So a lot of it's being driven by whether it be military and defence and, once again, the additional workforce. And people don't understand there's another sub-tier of the transient people that come in here to work. So we have the marine industry, we have the super yacht industry, very specialised technical engineers from all over the world will come in here for 3 to 6 months to work on those projects.
And as the population grows as well, it does start becoming a self-fulfilling base. The people that are living here, the tourism sector becomes a smaller portion of the total population. As we get those different specialty industries, we just get the demands of a population generating its own economy, I guess.
Yeah, which is cool.
To segue across, one of our early interactions was a while back now. You were doing residential development. So there was a couple of developments that come to mind, one on Hill Street, one on Mahogany Street.
Yep.
These were beautiful boutique apartment blocks, I guess you would consider them. Apartments probably not the right. Or townhouses, villas.
Yeah, townhouses.
These were complexes of sort of 4 to 6 apartments.
Townhouses.
I'm using the word apartments incorrectly.
I think the unique feature we did is they were houses because there was no body corporate.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the big difference, and this is where the future is, because most of us don't. I mean, I've just sold an apartment. James and I just recently sold an apartment we've had for many years, and it was fine. It yielded brilliantly. The rent was, fantastic returns. But eventually, I just got exhausted with the body corporate, and it wasn't a bad body corporate, but it's just another layer. If there's an issue with the building, and we just like getting things fixed, you're not in control. Yeah. And I had a lot of experience. I was on the body corporate of the Wharf at Woolloomooloo for nearly 5 years with 200 apartment owners and 10 restaurants and a hotel. It was
basically really, almost micro governments of that size.
Yeah, really, it was a real taste to it. So the unique thing we were trying to create, and we actually did have the support of council to think laterally because it doesn't fit the current planning scheme, was we were doing infill projects and creating houses on up to nearly 200 square metres. Now, what was challenging in Cairns is people would say, well, I can pay the same for a house on 800 square metres, so why would I want to live on 200 square metres? But we'd come out of Sydney and Melbourne and seen the insane, intense growth, and you can't recreate land. And if you want to live in Edge Hill, you can't make any more of it. So you got to think what is going to be viable and suitable for the urban design and what the community is going to accept, and also what the ageing population is. So you and I in 10 years' time will not want to leave where we live, but don't necessarily need to have a 3 or 4 bedroom house.
Correct.
So you'll see that this has happened all through Melbourne, all through Sydney, all through Brisbane, all through Perth, every city. Any Western city is going through the same challenge. So we were way ahead of our time because this is like 10 years ago. Where we actually just started off with a Queenslander, shifting it a little bit on the block to make the block more suitable, and then doing a battle axe and building a MiHaven home at the back. So we did that, half a dozen times. Then we got a little bit more excited and innovative and started thinking, well, could we do 2 or 4 on a 1,000 square metre block? The biggest challenge always as a planner and a designer and a builder is what do you do with cars? Because cars, you've got to get them out and in, forward direction, park, blah, 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 nightmare. So that limits things. And the other thing in Cairns that limits things is it's pretty challenging to go underground because of the water table. So every other city you just go down, put the parking in, go up. So we've got the problem is we've got to basically keep the parking on street level. So we did some really boutique, fantastic little houses. We could prove that by using better quality in your interior designs, getting higher ceiling heights, bigger windows, bigger door openings, just gives you a volumetric feeling of space. So you don't need the sprawl. You can be really efficient with that space. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cheaper to build because micro and getting it right and designing it properly and getting high quality build, it's going to be what it's going to be cost-wise. But to be able to convert a 800 to 1,000 square metre block of land and create 4 infill homes that are not strata titled. So the other unique feature was doing a high density easement. So the walls would join, but they're fire rated, just like terrace houses in Sydney that were built back in the 1800s. And
amazing, gone full circle.
We go down to Paddington. Some of those houses are 3.5 metres wide.
Yeah.
And they're built in you know the 1800s, and that was all acceptable. And then you come back now to planning and go, why can't I do a 5 metre wide block? And they go, no. But you know, you look at this, and those houses have been there for nearly 200 years, and they are
such an interesting
probably
case
worth $3
study.
million now.
Yeah, that's
so we couldn't even afford to live there. But it's just small can be fantastic. But I think the challenge in the industry, especially from a planning perspective, is, and I'm not boasting that we're just the best design and builders, but it can create sub-design and substandard and some pretty crappy outcomes. But for us, we were way ahead of our time. And so the market wasn't with us. And so the margin wasn't there. So the effort to go through planning and get the planning on, get the council on board that this infill would work, and then to create the opportunity and to go through the holding costs and then go through the building process and then go and market and sell it. We were lucky to make, whatever, 50, 100 grand. It wouldn't be worth the effort. Whereas...
and that's why you stopped doing those developments, essentially?
We just evolved. We just evolved. I mean, we got to the point of going, okay, we've done that, and then another opportunity came, and that got us into doing disability housing and then doing student accommodation and now doing what we're doing.
Where do we need to go before that infill and developers similar to yourself see the opportunities there on scale to do these sort of developments again? Say the developments you're doing 10 years ago, 8 years ago. How much further would prices need to push up? Okay,
that's a good point. So what drove us to go onto the airport project was James was trying to model up a build-to-rent model in the city. And land has gone up by, it's gone up, 14% this year or whatever, but year on year, we were so flatlined after the GFC, and then post-COVID we know we've gone bang. So suddenly land was double to what we were looking at in 2019, but then the building costs doubled as well. And so we even trying to build, say, 10, 12 really cool, studio apartments or something, just wasn't there, because also you need the population sort of average income to be up to, I don't know what the number is, but say
to support it.
Yeah, to support it. And Cairns still isn't there. And so I think James worked out that, a 2-bedroom apartment would almost cost you $1 million to build. You need to sell it for 1.5. And as much as the unit market's now finally going, it's
still not there though.
And we sold a 3-bedroom apartment for $600,000. It's cheap. We couldn't build it for $600,000. So it's still cheap. And that's why the market's still going to keep going, because the southerners come in and go, wow, this is so cheap.
It's so cheap, but also, as you well and truly know, supply and demand is the equation. If you've got no new supply coming in and you've got a growing population,
it's just going to keep going crazy. So, so until you'll get investors in, but it's just never been quite there. So the last time we had the massive apartment boom. Pre-GFC, which was basically the whole of Parramatta Park, then had the 3-storey walk-up flats. They were volume building then. They were working on really tight margins.
But it was fascinating. So you go back and you look at, say, in Menoura, there's a complex there called Whitfield Waters. These were 2-bed, 2-bath, 1-car apartments. They were selling off the plan for $240,000.
When was that?
That was 2008.
Right.
So we're looking at 16, 17 years ago, which isn't like, we're not talking the 80s. But now to replicate that, we're now looking at almost 5 times the cost. To build 2-bed, 2-bath, you're looking at $1 million.
$1 million,
That just really goes to show that why people may blame investors for the housing market, why people might blame immigration for the housing market. Just the cost.
And the sweet spot in the market at the moment is 750. So they sell in a week, 2 days, and there's nothing much. If the demand's that high, they're now going to go up to 900,000. So it's going to spiral, and so until things sort of calm down a bit and you can get some volume out there, I think building methodology will change. So when people will accept prefab construction modular, and it's pumping away now in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, and we can definitely bring. What they say in the modular space is it's not cheaper to build, it's just time.
Yeah.
So they can pump it out within half the time with less skills. And we have all these other challenges with the skilled workforce in Australia.
Yep.
So that's what's causing huge issues in the pipeline of delivering and construction and getting the prices down. Materials are going to continue to go up, aluminium, steel, all those things are going to continue to push prices. So I don't have the magic ball. I don't have the crystal ball. I'm sorry. But but we've all lived through. I mean, we could be sitting back 20 years ago and we would have been having the same conversations about why isn't this happening and why isn't that happening.
Correct.
But,
it is interesting to look at, I guess, the lay of the land, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I guess from that you can start to make some educated opinions on where things might be heading. And we look at, supply and demand, and it doesn't seem to be any slowing down the housing market for the foreseeable future.
No.
There's enough demand there. There's limited supply that I think that housing market's certainly in an interesting spot.
Yeah.
To move on, you guys were one of the first in the space doing student accommodation in Cairns.
Yes.
Talk us through that and how that played out and where it sits today.
So we literally were living in Parramatta Park.
Yep.
And we had gone and bought a Battleaxe block of land and built our first tiny little baby MiHaven home, which was our home. And we were surrounded by little Queenslanders all around us. And every night, about midnight, we'd hear the dinging of a microwave. And we used to laugh going, what is going on? And we realised it was just full of all these Asian students and they were coming in from wherever. And I had worked in Sydney. I'd worked for Modiplex and we'd done a lot of student accommodation back in the 90s. And I thought, wow, I wonder what the depth of the market is and I wonder how big international education is. So that's another industry here. Education is another huge industry. And so James and I had already pre-bought one block of land in Pembroke Street and we were doing our classic move the Queensland at the front, put a house up behind. And at that point, things were pushing a bit harder and going, I just don't think we can justify the cost. That's just not going to have enough volume in it to make it work. And so, we just had a brainstorm. I think I can remember getting on a plane, flying over to London, sat next to a girl who just left Melbourne University and she was from Indonesia. And I spent half the plane trip with a notebook asking her everything she hated about student accommodation in Melbourne and what she liked. And it was the smallest scale, she said, was safer to live in, more communal. So I took out all those takeouts and I came back and James and I sat down and went, okay, let's see what we can actually get on that block of land. And what we got on that block of land is nothing but short of extraordinary, really. It's 800 square metres. And we built 6 apartments, 3-storey, 7 bedrooms, all with their own ensuite bathroom, all with their own balcony, and then a shared kitchen communal area, and then external laundries, and then breakout living areas. So we benchmarked a really clever way of doing a very cool infill, and we... Also, I at that stage, I was getting significantly involved with everyone in the international sort of student accommodation market, and I remember getting someone from London who was a leader in that space, and he just happened to be visiting Cairns. So I said, "Can you come and have a look at what we're doing?" And he said, "This is just a benchmark in great design because you're meeting the tropics. You're building something that's completely right for this climate, and also the way that students would rather live. They don't want to be with 400.
No.
They want to be self-contained, doing their own thing. So that's what we did. So we did that at Pembroke. We copied that exactly to Gatton Street, and then we also then bought Martin Street, which had an old share house at the front, probably illegal. We ripped the thing to pieces, rewired it, made it all really beautiful, and then we mirrored image the same concept of the apartments at the back. So then within 3 years, we had 135 beds.
Oh, wow.
We opened Martin Street the day that we went into lockdown in March 20. And we were like, what the hell? There's a whole backstory that happened on that one. And all the international students, left Australia, as we know. But in a miracle, we maintained a 60% occupancy through the whole of the COVID period. And we came out at about 98%, and we've been like that ever since.
98% is extraordinary.
It's extraordinary.
It shows the demand.
Normally when you're doing your modelling, you go 40% over the wet season, 80% over dry season. But the other little subtlety was we took the word student out of the marketing and just called it MiHaven Living. So it's mostly young people, but there's just a crisis for rental accommodation at 0.8%, as we know. And so we've just found so many people coming up here to work, even, people working in pharmacy, medical, industry, are living with us short term because they're trying to find somewhere to live.
Do you think it could be somewhat where we'll see the future of housing is a lot more of those buildings?
I think it serves a purpose to a gap in the market.
Yep.
So you certainly wouldn't want everyone living in sort of communal sort of living because hasn't got the space of a home, but it's a great starting point for people when they're arriving somewhere and finding their feet and finding their employment and settling in. We don't have families. You've got to be single and you've got to be over 18 and you've got to deal with communal living, which has all the, complexities of who stole my Vegemite, all those sorts of issues.
I guess where my brain goes, and we've got this very much emerging trend where children are moving out of the home a lot later in life. And when I say if they do.
Or they come back.
And I guess I'm referring to children as 20 and 30-year-olds, like
Absolutely.
Children in their own right, living with mum and dad, but staying with the family in the family home so much longer because of the cost of living situation. And when I hear of sort of, self-contained apartments with that breakout living area, I can really see the appeal there for those sort of people that might be living with mum and dad but may not want to do that anymore for a myriad of reasons, independence, whatever. I can see a real place for that into the future, especially, the affordability of being able to do that and having a central kitchen rather than, one-bedroom apartments where you've got to do... So I think that's, it's certainly an interesting model.
And it's a phenomenon that's been going for a long time overseas. So the UK benchmarked it as co-collective living. So when I was doing the research for MiHaven Living, James and I were very much looking at these other models, which are probably more sophisticated. Europe will, in European cities, you'll see those sorts of models, but, Europeans are very used to living in high density, small spaces. Aussies just like big backyards and, media rooms and all these McMansion, sort of aspirations. But I think that's where we're going to see
I think we're
change.
Getting forced there.
You're going to get forced to it. The other big gap in the market is single women over 50. So with the high rate of divorce, those women have usually been the mums at home raising the family. Most of them would not have any superannuation or very little superannuation, and they are the most vulnerable people in our society. So there is definitely, and there's a lot of movements going on. James and I have done a lot of sort of pro bono work with not-for-profits as to what those models can look like. And you will find, there's going to be lots of changes about co-living, co-sharing, co-investing together to create a communal living space. There was a great workshop that council put on at the Tanks back in May. I was one of the speakers at that, and they brought some people in from all over Australia where they're testing all these different ways of thinking. Lots of things need to change to make these things viable. Banks need to change their opinion as to what the lending looks like. Council needs to change some of the ideas of, planning and design for co-living spaces. A lot of the body corporate laws or the strata laws need to sort of modify a little bit. So, there will be pressure to make these changes.
And for anyone looking at getting into that sort of share accommodation space, you've obviously had some experience now looking after 135 rooms or whatever the exact number was there. What advice would you give? What's some sort of red flags or what should people be cautious of before entering into that space?
Look, you just got to have amazing people skills. You've got to be on it, vetting the right people to live together. You've got to go through you can't control every part of that. It's no different to a property manager renting out a house and assuring the landlord that this family are just going to be fantastic. It doesn't matter if they've got 5 dogs. The backyard's going to look magnificent.
Of course it will.
Okay, red flags. Common sense will give you those red flags. So, there's all those different ways of checking people's rental history or that sort of stuff. And you just, with us, most of our people are under the RTA, rooming accommodation agreements, so there's some good laws around that to protect them and to protect the landlord. But once again, you've just got to have great people on the ground looking after everything.
On balance, they've been relatively self-sufficient, for lack of a word, or you haven't encountered too many sort of issues, I guess, on balance? That's a lot of room to
over 8 years, absolutely, yeah. And I credit our team for being so fantastic on the ground managing all of that.
Interesting. It's an exciting space, and it's certainly a space I can see continuing to grow into the future. The demand's going to be there.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of different models for living together, for sure, yeah.
Moving on, I was very fortunate the other night to be invited along to your investor night in regards to your development at the airport, Skyhaven. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a quick overview of what that project is, and then we can do a bit of a deep dive into a couple of things that was really appealing for me, and I guess a couple of questions I had in regards to it.
Yeah, that was a really exciting night. That was a benchmark, I think, for James and I. I was mentally exhausted the following day thinking, wow, we really had an hour to sort of pitch to the Cairns community, and we had no idea. I think that was probably a big mistake by us not to realise just the support that the Cairns community would have to this project.
I think the authenticity is too, when you get a whole lot of people in a room.
Yeah.
It's one thing seeing something on paper. You see something on paper, you see the numbers on paper. It struggles to highlight the passion, the excitement, and even the opportunity when it's just on paper, where sitting in that room surrounded by a lot of other very smart, intelligent people, everyone could see the potential in that project. So continue on. Sorry to interrupt.
The phone rang hot straight after that. Was so exciting. So what we're doing, it was very much James's idea, riding his bike a couple of years ago with Richard Barker, who was the CEO of the airport, and James lamented that we just couldn't get anything to stack up in Cairns. We'd love to go to scale. We'd love to create some different hybrid accommodation in this town. And with the doubling of land and everything else, and Richard said, come and look at the airport. I've got plenty of land, and it's the 7th busiest airport in Australia, and we're the only one with no accommodation based at the airport. So that's where it started. And a lot of people could say, oh, why would we need one more hotel bed in this town? And it's a hybrid. So it has the functionality to be a hotel operation in the sense you can stay a night. But what we've done quite brilliantly is gone into an incredible amount of research, and that goes back to the beginning of our conversation today about how diversified the economy is. So this is not being built as a tourist hotel, and we're not looking at trying to package it up to tourists offshore to say come and stay at the Cairns airport. As you know, most airports in Australia all have accommodation outside the front door, and more that we travel, we will always choose to stay at the airport because we just want to get on the plane first thing in the morning and get out. So it's got that market, but the big point of difference in the design of what we're doing is every single room, be it a studio, one bedder, a couple of two bedders, is they're self-contained. So there's the ability to prep your food, cook, but you can also go downstairs to the cafe. We'll also have like a food larder that you can pick up your basket of whatever you need if you're staying. But we discovered that there's this huge transient population that works in Cairns for up to 3 months, and at the moment they're really forced into Airbnb. Hotels really aren't fit for purpose for what they want, and you can't rent anything. So the aviation industry, engineering industry, MRO as it's called, we talked about earlier in this podcast, that workforce is around 400 people at Cairns Airport. At least 30 to 40% is a fly-in, fly-out from Europe, Canada and Ireland, and they are working on 3-month contracts. So they come in as a workforce, very specialised, highly paid team. They strip those planes down. They are here to work and sleep and work and sleep. And if you have that accommodation across the road from where the aviation engineering base is, it's a win-win for that industry because they
100%.
tender those projects 2 to 3 years in advance. They price in bringing in the workforce. So they were the first driver that we discovered when we were thinking about it. Then we had a roundtable with state government, health, education, you name it, and they all came to us and said, you have no idea the additional workforce that we have to support into Cairns. State emergency services have to come in when we're going through the cyclone region. They bring another couple of hundred people every sort of wet season. Health every month has about 80 to 100 allied health workers that come in, and they stay for a month and they go every month. So it's not seasonal. And if you look at the expansion of Cairns Hospital, that's just going to continue to
100%.
Ever. Every hospital precinct 100%. In Australia, everywhere in the world, just continues to grow. So they need high quality accommodation. They need to be self-contained. They need to think that they can, be a kilometre from work or whatever. So that was another driver. Then, without doubt, you've got disrupted flights, airline crews, and then you've got all the bulk of the flights coming out of Cairns is between 6 in the morning, as we know, to about 11. It's like peak hour at airport. And if you're outside of Cairns, be it Mission Beach, Tablelands, Mossman, wherever, most of us would always come in the night before to get those flights. So
I had this discussion with my wife, and whenever you're travelling, jumping on a flight, there's always like a little bit of extra time that you allow for the Uber to turn up. Or for something to go wrong, or for something to not go right. So Cairns Airport is such a huge catchment for such a big area that to be able to come stay there, I think is one massive green flag that I instantly appreciated.
Yeah.
And then you're 100% right. I know from running a number of Airbnbs myself, how many 3-month stays we get, how many doctors and how many nurses that are here on contracts will come and stay in those properties.
Yeah.
Defence personnel up here for different things.
Absolutely.
Even transport and main roads. We've hosted a lot of different specialists that have come.
So have we at MiHaven Living, huge workforces, and they have a high tier of people that they've got to find accommodation for too, and that will always be.
100%. One thing I almost interrupted when you said it at the start there is Cairns doesn't need another hotel.
Not at the moment. It actually does.
It actually does.
I didn't think it did either. But when Richard Barker was talking about the forecast, if you're going to double the passenger movements, and CBR Richard Ellis has released that report called Runway to, I can't remember the last part of it, but that report was published in July with 7 new aircraft routes coming into Cairns, which is happening right now. There's a need of something like 104,000 additional room nights, which we don't actually have the supply of. And at the moment, this last quarter, we've been at 89% occupancy in the hotels.
So Cairns needs another hotel.
Yeah.
And I know that's not your target, but
need a lot of refurb as well.
What it speaks to, though, is even the fact that if you have a nurse or a doctor or someone working for Queensland Transport that wants to come and stay for 3 months, they would accept a studio hotel room that doesn't have the self-contained amenities, but they can't. There isn't actually an option there for them to rent something like that for 3 months.
No, it doesn't exist. That's the thing. There is not that. I mean, people stopped building strata service apartments back in the 90s here, I think. You haven't seen that come out of the ground again.
When I look at a project, I look at the demand, and we've spoken about demand and how there is so much there from not just the tourism sector, not just people travelling and wanting to stay for one night before they head overseas, but people coming and staying there for 3 months.
Yeah.
But then I also look at supply. The fact that you guys were looking at doing something at scale in Cairns but couldn't actually make it financially stack up is super interesting. Sure. It speaks to the limited supply and the fact that no one's probably going to come in and do what Crystal Brook did and build another 3 hotels in Cairns overnight.
No one's got Kazan's access to cash.
Cash is the big problem. Cash is the huge problem. And banks are very restrictive at doing large-scale developments without pre-sales, without...
Impossible. And that's why there's no cranes in the sky here.
Yep.
The only cranes we saw was when the hospital was doing the next, expansion.
Yep.
And I always go into a city and measure how many cranes are in the sky to sort of get a heartbeat of what's going on.
Correct. So I think from a demand side, there's so much demand there. The fact that it's the 7th biggest airport in Australia, doesn't have hotel accommodation on site is a massive, massive tick for me. But then also the fact that there is a massive shortage of accommodation across Cairns, especially for that transient workforce, is very appealing. And then I think there were some really smart design choices that I saw you guys make. Firstly, the fact that you're leasing that land, not buying it, means that you've ended up with a really large parcel of land for that project.
Yeah, we've got 10,000 square metres.
10,000 square metres.
So that's what makes it work, because we have not been holding. If we had translated that land into the CBD, we'd probably be $10 million holding costs for 2 years, waiting to get DA approval, waiting to get building approval, waiting to get finance. It would never happen.
That's before you even put a shovel in the dirt.
And we've seen all those other big projects in the CBD that have been out to market. Was it Nova?
Nova City's perfect example.
Yeah, perfect example. So too big.
Yep.
scale too big. Anything really high-rise here is going to cost a hell of a lot more than it costs in Brisbane because you've got to bring all of that up.
Yep.
So, the smarts for us was it is leasehold land. A lot of people get nervous about leasehold.
Yeah.
People don't realise the whole of Canberra is on leasehold land. Parts of Sydney, Darling Harbour, parts of Chinatown I've worked in, all on leasehold land.
Interesting.
So
I knew Canberra.
Which is floating out in the harbour. That's leasehold.
Interesting.
The whole of London is leasehold. So it's a cash-on-cash model. This is
even
like
the airport itself, though, the Cairns airport.
Every airport in Australia is leased.
And many people may not know that.
Yeah, so every airport in Australia is on leasehold land. So some of them are federal government controlled originally. So Sydney Airport, before it was privatised, was Federal Airports Australia. I worked on Sydney Airport a lifetime ago. But in more of the regional cities, it's usually state. So state owns that land long term, forever. The airport has a 99-year lease, and then we have got a lease under their lease. And it works because you're paying like a very low base ground lease, which equates to almost the same power bill that we're running year on year. And that's why it's coming out with such a fantastic return for the investors. Because
you ended up with such a large parcel of land, and this comes back to like the development costs, you're able to basically keep it at 3 stories. Exactly. So that's a sweet spot too. So ever since COVID, we've seen construction in crisis. So building costs, have gone to an escalation we've never seen in our careers, and we know the reasons for that: COVID, supply chain, all those things. And then we've seen a lot of construction companies across Australia. Some of the best builders we know in the southern states have not been able to survive this escalation and the pressure points. But the beauty of this project is it's a 3-story walk up. I mean, yes, there'll be lifts in there, but it's not a complex build. It's a slab on ground. The other unique thing about it, and I don't think ever in my career we've had this opportunity, but the land's brand new. The land was supercharged by the airport for 15 years, which means it's been compacted soil. And we all know about the flood risks in Cairns, but this has been, metres above any flood level, and then we've brought it back down. So you may have seen at the beginning of the year the airport was scraping it and taking that topsoil off. For anyone unfamiliar with the site we're actually talking about, when you drive into the airport, you get to the first roundabout, and essentially it's to the right. That's right, and you can see the SkyHaven wrapping around it. So all that was done, and then also what's really sweet about the project is while we were coming up with the idea and negotiating with the airport exec team, they were engineering at the same time the subdivision of that land to complete all the services, and they had the benefit of our design working at the same time. So all the supply to connections is all to what and it's not a high demanding site construction, but it certainly gives you a lot of confidence as a builder that everything's going to connect nicely. And we're not excavating, so there's no cost there. Slab on ground, car parking around, 3-story walk up, it's block construction. Yes, architecturally it's going to look absolutely stunning, and James has, driven all of that with our 2 in-house architects, and we'll be really proud of what that's going to look like at the end. But also, because we've done so much research with the market through the design process, and we all work in the same building, so I'm down one end and the architects are in the other, and we're all sharing this knowledge of what the market needs, because you only get one chance at the very beginning. It's very hard to go back. You can't go back. You can't retrofit. You always, whenever you build a house, you go, oh, damn, I wish we'd done the pantry twice as big, or I wish, with the decking around the pool had another metre. You can change it, but it's going to cost you a lot. So you really want to get your research right. So we're not a fast, quick build developer, don't care. We care about everything, every detail, and we care about the longevity of the buildability and how, the life cycle of that building is really important. So the hours that have been spent right down to mechanical engineering to make sure there's fresh air intake into every one of those rooms, because if you're going to cook, you've got to be able to circulate that air. But also, James is thinking about, well, how do we reduce the mould content in the tropics and make sure that, we don't have this major issue of refurbishing. So that intel's been sort of thought through the design. Acoustics, all right? We're at the airport. Everyone's going to go, oh, I don't want to stay there because I'll hear planes. You won't hear a thing. You'll be lucky to hear a pin drop. So
there has been so much acoustical engineering design into the thickness of the glass, right down to the type of flooring systems we want to use, which is this fantastic Bolin material from Europe that will be cushioned, so you won't hear the rattling noise of suitcases at 5 in the morning if you're a pilot and you're trying to sleep. So it's that attention to detail.
A lot of details gone into it. It's a project that I've been watching, and it's certainly a very exciting project. I think there's maybe 2 red flags that investors might have concerns about. One of those we've already framed up, and that's the leasehold fact. Sure. The fact that it is a leasehold. But the reality is it's going to be a very high cash flowing business. Yes. That there's going to be a very quick return on investment. So I think the fact that it's a 50-year lease.
50-year lease, yeah.
That's a long time to get a return on investment. So I think looking at it as a business opportunity more than a property investment is probably the right framing.
Absolutely. It's a hybrid of that. Yeah. You've got to get your head around that. But once you do, then you understand how it works. Yeah.
So very much looking at it as a business opportunity. The cash flow that James ran through is certainly very exciting. The other red flag I think a lot of investors, and especially people in the property investment space, might have is the fact that it's essentially an off-the-plan development. Mm-hmm. Where we're building, it's not built yet.
Yes.
And, you alluded to this the other night, that a lot of superannuation funds and that would jump at this in a heartbeat if it was already built.
Absolutely. We'd sell it 10 times at the moment. Yeah. But someone's got to take the risk.
Correct. But I think the fact you guys have been building in Cairns for as long as you have, the fact that, you said the land's new, and what you meant by that is all the infrastructure's there ready to go. Mm-hmm. And then the fact that you're not going 20 stories high.
Yeah.
Massively limits the risk of this not actually proceeding. The other big factor as well is the council approval's already there.
Yes.
The fact
it's not council.
It's not council.
The sweetest thing is the airport has its own land use planning scheme. So, that was another green light for me. Yeah. Because we didn't waste, I'm not saying we waste time when we work with council.
I reckon you could almost say that.
We love the council, but they have limited resources, and when demand peaks like it is at the moment,
things can be challenging when you need council approval.
It's really hard. So that was a fantastic result for us.
It's not uncommon for people to be doing larger scale developments and it take a year to get approvals through council. But
I'd say 2.
Yeah. So to be able to have that tick and know that you can build it, falling under that planning scheme, the fact that you can actually go ahead with it. Mm-hmm. For me, a lot of the risks associated with buying into this project with it being off the plan have been taken off the table.
Thank you.
So I think that's, a massive green light. So anyone that's listening to this and weighing up the pros and cons of these sort of projects, the fact that it is going to be a cash flowing business very quickly.
Yeah.
And the fact that it is off the plan, but that also creates the opportunity at the moment. But a lot of the risks of buying off the plan have already been removed off the table.
And it's not been strata titled. So we've set it up under a unit trust structure. So some of you will know what that is. Some of you may not know it. But it's a real estate unit trust. So you're basically buying shares into the ownership. And so the total development cost is estimated around 60 million. The build is probably around 56 million. We're just stress testing that again at the moment because there will be probably a little bit of a push on inflationary pressures. But we will be doing this as a fixed price contract to also de-risk it for the unit trust, but we also have to make sure we get that right.
Yeah, of course.
At the moment, the banks, fantastic support from 2 tier 1 leading banks in Australia, with a 50% non-recourse structure.
Fantastic.
Which then means we need to raise about 30 million equity. So there's a bit of a stress test that, the banks may go up a little bit more on the leverage, which then would give you a better return if you're a unit trust holder. But we would work together with the unit trust holders to say, do you want to stress test that more, or are we all comfortable where we are? So the game plan at the moment is we would love to start, we're ready to go. It's shovel ready. Everything's BADA approved. We know we've got a wet season coming up. We've built through wet seasons for 20 years. But our aim at the moment is to start build by March. And just in the last few weeks has been an incredible upturn, especially in the Cairns business community, the whole region actually. Tablelands people who have a vested interest, understand Cairns. Like, we're not selling this to people that don't get what this town's about and the future growth. And I think Richard Barker definitely gave a great sort of piece in that presentation on Tuesday to show where Cairns Airport's going, and you'll probably need another 2 Sky Havens by the time we're
Most
finished.
definitely.
We've got the Olympics coming, we've got the PNG NRL expansion. There won't be enough accommodation to service that expansion of the league. There's just so many more drivers coming into the market that are going to really push the demand scenario for this project.
And for investors watching this, we can get the numbers to them.
Sure.
Essentially, it is around an 18% return that's been baselined.
Yes.
Or forecast, I guess, is probably the right word.
Within the third year of operations. So
Yep.
2 years of build, 24 months. You can't get a return while you're building, but you wouldn't get one of you doing your own development. But the day the door opens, and the unique thing in this model, which we've been conservative, so we haven't even done any upside. So that's 2 buildings. We call it stage 1, stage 2, but it is in its entirety 186 rooms, and there's a little road going between the 2 buildings. The first building will have the reception, the cafe, and all the infrastructure you need to operate, and that will be, I think, 98 rooms, and then stage 2 is 88 rooms. So the build for us is we will have stage 1 building complete 6 months ahead of stage 2. And there won't be any impact of the construction of stage 2 because it will just be doing the internal fit off. So you won't have any messy things. We'll make it look beautiful.
Not concrete trucks coming back and forth. And
No, we'll make sure that looks great. So you're instantly earning income, generating income the moment the door is open and you're taking bookings. Factoring out the first 6 months because we don't model that because we want to be conservative. Year 1 is based on all rooms complete, 186 opened, and we're quite conservative. I think our modelling was like 68% occupancy. Don't get me today, but the ADR was, once again, I think pretty reasonable, about a $250
I'm going to say very conservative actually, but anyway, continue on.
Yeah, but you want to make sure you can reach that expectation for investors.
100%.
And we've done the same thing with other projects we've done. And, satisfying the expectation, we live in this town. It's pretty brave to go out there and say, back us.
Yeah.
But you know where we live. And we have a vested interest. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, James and I are not leaving Cairns. We've decided this is our home forever. And sorry, kids, but we love it here. But also, it's the relationships you build in this town and the trust you build in this town that I believe, hand on heart, will make this the most successful thing we've ever done. Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. So if anyone is interested in the actual numbers, reach out to me, reach out to yourself, Sarah.
Sure.
We can get those numbers to them.
We've got an investment prospectus, professionally done. We're working with Mandela as the operator, but also they have the AVSA licence to manage the unit trust. The whole structure is all set up. We've got people signing up as we speak into the unit
You've raised
trust.
about half the private funds?
Getting there. Yeah. We've got commitment.
Yep.
It's just now going through the mill of people doing their due diligence.
Of course.
But we're definitely tipping over the sticky point of saying this is now going to motor.
Yep.
Ideally, I'd love to close off the cap raise by Christmas.
Yep.
I know it's a tight time frame, but the work's been done. So, we're very happy to go out and talk to anyone, present to anyone in this community that wants to know more. We have a whole data room, which, if you sign an NDA, you can get access to, the enormous amount of research and work that's been done to support the assumptions.
Certainly an exciting project, and certainly something that I can see has a huge place in the current market.
Yep.
But it also could be very profitable for those that jump into it.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I'm going to retire on it.
I hope not. I hope not.
I'm putting my money. Well, I do know. Eventually, I don't think I could.
You couldn't retire. Don't kid yourself.
Well, I'll find something. I do love the art gallery. So,
You're not going to sit around sewing. Let's be honest.
Yeah, we'll see.
Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I very much look forward to what you continue to do because I know this won't be your last project.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.